The following activity is good for medium-sized classes between 5 and 15 and is ideal for language classes like English and French and pretty much any liberal arts class that requires you to think in the future, to think ahead, predict the future, to think of the past, and to sort of exercise your critical thinking skills. And that's not to say that the STEM subjects don't exercise your critical thinking skills, but the emphasis here is on talking and discussing heady issues that sometimes can be philosophical, and that's not really the realm of your sciences like biology and physics. So just to keep that in mind as we move forward with this particular episode. So this activity involves students talking in a circle or talking together and then reporting back to the teacher what their thoughts are on a given subject. It involves students talking about what they think would happen. So they're thinking in a conditional expression. They're thinking in terms of imaginary circumstances. So typically what I do is if there's a blackboard or a whiteboard, I'll write the question on the board and I'll instruct students to brainstorm for 10 to 15 minutes to think about what might happen if a certain condition was met. So one example that I sometimes give to my students is what would happen if everyone went colorblind? That is, what would happen if all of the human race could not see color? And then the students will work in groups of 4 to 5, or it depends on, obviously how many students you have. They'll work in groups and they'll come up with reasons, and then they'll report back to me and the rest of the class. And they'll talk about some of the ramifications of people not being able to see color. So you could take this in many different directions depending on what you're talking about in your own classes. You could talk about characters in a book, what would happen if they had done this or if they would do this particular action. You could talk about certain historical figures and what would happen if a historical figure had chosen to do something else. What if Paul Revere didn't ride through the town? So you can sort of have students exercise their decision-making skills, their critical thinking skills, their ability to think ahead. You can have students sort of make decision trees, which is a really important skill for students to develop. So the really good thing about this activity is that it requires students to sort of branch their thinking, for lack of a better phrase. It requires them to sort of think about possibilities and to extend those possibilities indefinitely. This is a really valuable skill for all people because it fosters this sort of critical thinking and this extensive branching outness of thinking that all adults need to do when they need to make really valuable decisions. So I do highly recommend doing this activity for your language classes and other classes that might easily lend themselves to this particular activity. Other ideas that you can incorporate into your class for this particular activity is you can have students brainstorm what would happen if everyone forgot how to read, what would happen if the wind stopped, what would happen if there were no clouds, what would happen if we all had telepathy, or if we all could read minds, what would happen if we were all living on Mars, what would happen if civil war broke out, what would happen if vast resources of oil were discovered in the country, what would happen if everybody wanted to kill everybody else. So there are many different ways that you can twist or spin this activity, and lots of possibilities. So I do highly recommend it. Bye for now.